Matt's crackling fire. Hey
Yes.
everybody, Tara Bachland here with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, getting rolling finally with our Maytide celebrating May Day with Matthew Wood and Seán O'Donoghue. Sorry for the delay. We had just one technical issue after another, but it looks like we are good enough for now.
Yeah.
And so put out your good vibes out there to help us make sure that this gets out to you. So, hello and welcome everybody to this special event. Of course, May Day was yesterday, but you'll soon find out why we're talking about it today. And so, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And real quick, I'm just going to let you know, of course, let's see. Well, let's get rolling with Matt and Seán because we've had enough issues so far. Excuse the delay. Let's get rolling with Maytide, celebrating May Day.
Hi there, everybody. And we might just begin with Seán. What did you do yesterday? Because you're more of a pagan. And what? Oh, I had a great class last night. Gee, I have to. That was phenomenal with David Milgram, the chiropractor. About cerebral spinal fluid. So
Ooh.
you get to listen for free, of course, as a teacher, contributor, and you will enjoy it. I mean, it was kind of mind blowing. It was probably, I thought it was maybe one of the most exciting classes we've ever had. I actually thought, but I have different standards than other people. So, so that's what I did on May Day. And let's see, I did a little bit of planting, but I didn't do any celebrations. But you, what were you up to yesterday?
Well, yesterday, I would have loved to have been in the class. It does sound amazing. I'm really looking forward to listening to it. But
Yeah.
I was up before dawn because in the Irish tradition, they say that if you wash your hands in the dew of the May Day morning,
Wow.
then you will gain the ability to untangle things and untie things, which I think is sort of presented literally, but I think it probably plays out on a level of life as well, in a Solomon seal sort of way almost.
Wow.
Um, and so I was up before dawn doing that. And there'll be another chance to do that because by the astrological reckoning, Beltane will be this Sunday. Um, so you can never wash your hands in the dew too many times. And then I went about the land and gathered some of the feral daffodils and some maple and alder branches, and found in town a blooming crabapple branch and brought those in. And then in the evening, just had a nice, quiet ritual to usher in this next season of the year. Because in the old Irish calendar, there were only two seasons, the dark season and the bright season. The year
Huh.
began in the darkness at
Hmm.
Samhain, at Halloween, because everything begins in the darkness, just like everything begins in the womb. And then Beltane, right now, was the time when the bright of the year began. I always think about it as in the autumn, all of the energy, all of the life force is going down below into the root.
Oh, did we lose you? Yikes. Oh, we may have to wait for you to come back there. Um, in the spring, it must be coming back up. Well, at my place, I don't really celebrate the fishing opener, but it's always around. It's the first Saturday after the 1st of May, and there'll be a big bonfire and some fisher people. Sometimes we have as many as 10 or 15. It's gotten a little smaller since some land exchanged hands, and so it's not quite as easy anymore. But so it's the fishing opener, trout season actually on this little river here. So that's about as much celebration as in my neighborhood. I guess you could say the trout are rising.
Yeah. Well, the trout and the salmon are very important in
Yeah.
this time of year in Irish culture too. So the fishing all fits in.
Yeah. 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 So you were just mentioning that the roots in the fall and then got cut off, and it may happen a few more times, and I'll try to take over anytime it does happen. But yeah.
Right. I poured a little bit of whiskey in case the other crowd is
Uh,
has something
uh,
to do with the
uh,
interference. But so we think of in autumn, all the trees are sending all their energy down to the roots. The seeds and the fruits are falling to the ground. Everything is going down below into its more dormant state and into that incubating womb of the earth. And then this is a time of year when that flow shifts so that everything that was down below before begins to rise up above. And we get it first with many of the white blossomed tree flowers, the hawthorn and the blackthorn and the apple and the elder this time of year, and that white being a color of the other world, and they're having that shimmering nature and those scents that really invite us into a different kind of consciousness. And so it really marks that time quite profoundly.
Well, yeah, we are just getting our first flowers in the last couple days. I think we're a little ahead of time. And you up in Maine, you're very similar to Minnesota, Wisconsin here. How are the flowers
Right.
up there?
So there was one crabapple tree in a supermarket parking lot that was flowering.
Oh,
None of the other trees are flowering except the maples are.
oh,
And then, but we have the daffodils are up where there are trout lilies. The trout lilies are up. The first few dandelion leaves are up. So we're in that beginning time. And the blackbirds are returning to the alders, which is an old Irish way of marking this time.
oh, interesting. I'll have to watch for that. I don't have alders quite around here. You're a little bit more boreal forest. I'm about 100 miles south of that. I was up at my Upper Michigan place, which is mostly boreal forest up there. Well, I mean, there's northern hardwoods, they call it too. But there's definitely a lot more alders up there than there really aren't any native here. Yeah, so well, we'll have to talk about that, the mythology and uses of the alder. Let's see, the special trees, you could call that a tree, one could call it a shrub. Of course, in the west and southwest of the United States, it's a good-sized tree, maybe not much bigger than that, but I mean, it's a real tree, which is quite a beautiful tree, kind of like a beech or something. Whereas in the Midwest and the Canadian Shield, it's a shrub or a tree that spreads out so quickly. It doesn't really get much bigger than that, and usually smaller too. It always marks, like on my land in Upper Michigan, where there's a seep. There it is. And then we have hawthorn, of course. Sorry, my fire is just crackling away like really strong. Wow. Some kind of wood in there. I'm not sure what's doing that. Yeah, so we wanted to talk about that. What other trees were we thinking of?
We're thinking about the elder, and even though it comes a little bit later, I think of the linden whenever I think about all of those shimmering blossomed trees that have the flower medicines that bring a certain calm and cool to people.
Yeah, now technically the elder that we use in medicine, at least the North American one, Sambucus canadensis, blooms in midsummer, very definitely. I don't know about Sambucus nigra, the European one, which is said to be identical to the West Coast one, but it's called usually Sambucus mexicana. That's the one in California, Oregon, Mexico, evidently. But the one that blooms right now is actually the red one, the Sambucus racemosa, which is a little more toxic. I ran across one herbalist who used it just because that's what's in her area exclusively. But most of us would not. Darn it, I gotta turn off my. Yeah.
Yeah, I personally don't worry so much about the flowers with that one, but I would be a little bit more hesitant with the berries of that one myself.
Yeah, and definitely the bark has killed kids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the bark of the European and Canadian ones perhaps could do that too, but I don't know of any case histories. Yeah. So the problem was kids making whistles out of the red berried one, and boom, died from it. So it's cyanide, but so to me that one's a real midsummer tree, but certainly it's got all the fairy applications and the hawthorn. So I mean, the great fairy trees are hawthorn and elder, and is there another one or?
Well, so in the Irish tradition, it would be hawthorn, blackthorn,
Oh,
rowan, and oak. That would be the primary fairy trees.
oh,
The Irish tradition is a little bit afraid of elder, but I don't know how much that's like. I imagine that a lot of that might have come in with the coming of more formal Christianity over time. I don't know if there might have been older, more positive views of the elder, and I think of the elder more when I think about the Scandinavian and Germanic fairy worlds.
well, I know that they feared elder actually in England. We're not talking about British, really. I mean, it may have come from the Celts, but they had some. Well, I mean, by what we mean by fear, it would be better to say carefulness, really, than fear, I think. And so I remember just one account. It was kind of funny. A folklorist who found there was a thunderstorm, and some kids were taking shelter under an elder. And he said, "Why are you taking?" He knew his folklore. "Why are you taking shelter under an elder? Isn't you're not supposed to hang out with elders?" And they said, "Oh, it's because it'll protect us." So that kind of reversed it. That was kind of the because it's so the elder is associated with Mother Nature. Let's see, that at least is more Germanic. So that's like Hans Christian Andersen or the what's her name brothers and Brothers Grimm, where they have, well, I haven't read them with their elder, but Hans Christian Andersen really goes into it. For him, the elder is queen of the underworld, king of the underworld, and also the poetic muse, all of which makes sense because alternate reality is really, even if you're hallucinating under the effect of some drug, you're still in the imagination. So the imagination, dream time, and the spirit world are all the same, and not fantasy, but imagination. So yeah, you can see how the poetic muse would be signaled there. And there's the only story by him I remember. The old man upstairs comes down to tell stories to the little boy who's been jumping in the puddles in May and got sick. And his mother gave him elderflower or elderberry tea. And I think he tells a story about the elder. I'm not sure. But in that story, the elder is kind of the poetic muse there. So yeah, you don't play around with the fairy people or dimension shifts lightly. And our scoffers out there in the world audience can scoff all they want, but boy, you don't play with the fairy people, man. So yeah.
Yeah. And that what part of that sense in Ireland is that any tree that was not planted by a human hand shouldn't be messed with.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I know, and there's stories about the hawthorn. When the hawthorn's alone in the field, the road should be built around it, not over it, not knock it down, which is also in Iceland as well.
Right.
And actually, I would have to say there's got to be something to that, because it's very seldom that you ever find a hawthorn by itself in the middle of a field. I mean, it almost always is spreading. There's just tons of little hawthorns everywhere. I don't know that I've ever seen a hawthorn by itself. And it's funny, even when people plant them for a decoration, ordinary horticulturalists and gardeners and city planters and things, they'll plant a bunch in a row. I don't know that I've ever seen it planted by itself. So there's even an unconscious thing there. Yeah. So those are two of our main trees, I would say. Yeah, the rowan, we actually talked about the rowan a long time ago. So that's done. We won't talk about it today so much. Yeah, so, and then there's the alder. So the alder and the elder, maybe originally the name was the same, but let's see, actually, elder, the derivation, yeah, I bet it is the same. So the true derivation of elder, okay, Maud Grieve for once has it wrong. So she's the great reference system for Western herbalists, English Anglophiles, and she was a daunting, female herbalist and 50s, and actually helped keep herbalism from being made illegal. They tried to make it illegal in the House of Commons, and then she and I think it was that other kind of her successor, I forgot her name. She wrote some books too. They stormed into the House of Lords, and and as David Hoffman described it, most of these guys had been raised by nannies who were a lot like these old ladies now, who were like, you better not outlaw this, and besides, herbalists and House of Lords, all the lords, they all knew themselves to be anachronisms. So we're not going to outlaw an anachronism. So they didn't go along with the outlawing of herbal medicine, besides which Henry VIII had decreed it in perpetuity to be legal for all his subjects. And unfortunately, us Americans and Irish have negated that particular rule. And for that reason, herbalism is better established in England than any other country in the Western world, probably. Yeah, has more, trust in the public and so on. Yeah. So, but the true derivation of the word for elder is so in Iceland, I was reading that the name for the fairies is Hulda folk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, hidden. And the name for the alder tree for the Mother Earth, or fairy godmother, the mother of all the fairies in Europe, is Holdemore, the Hulda mother, who's a very popular folkloric figure. They make little dolls of her and things. And a little old lady with a herb basket under her arm. And so Hulda, so that means the fairy mother, the mother of the hidden. And she was very much respected still is over there. And so our word elder, and evidently the word alder, also come from this Hulda, hidden from the fairy folk. And so yeah, they're just innumerable stories about the elder. I don't know much about the alder. You'll have to fill us in there. But the panpipes are made from the alder, again, from they can be hollowed out easily and then made into, and they were said to be the most haunting music. Pan, Lord of the Underworld, who again is the Greeks kind of balderized everything. Pan, or maybe we balderized the Greek idea of Pan, but all their gods and goddesses kind of became like cartoon characters. In fact, a lot of them are cartoon characters nowadays, but
Right.
and that's really pretty much the way it is before Christianity, before literacy even came along. They're already kind of balderized. So,
Well, I think probably especially in their urban versions. Like I feel like the version we get of the Greek gods we get from
yeah,
Athens primarily, and so that I wonder if there might have been something very different for people in the countryside.
yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah. So the little Haldemar. So I read one custom I read in Germany, and these are my friend Wolf-Dieter Storl has written a couple books. I recommend anything by him. He he found, all these traditions are much more common just in, more in hidden valleys and rural places than in cities. Yeah, but they're just much more extant there, even in Germany. And so one tradition I read too, so blessing the herbs. So each spring, the farmers and the herbalists and the country people would pour a cup of milk or a saucer of milk and put it by the elder tree, and that would be their offering, kind of the way the American Indians offer to the um, to tobacco or corn to the to plants when they pick them. But they'd only make that one offering, and then on the 15th of August, the plants, many of them ready by then, they'd bring them into the church to get them blessed by the Annunciation, the feast of the Annunciation of Mother Mary, when she went up to heaven. And I don't know my Catholicism. Maybe it's the feast of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary. I don't know, but at any rate, so you would get you'd get blessed both ways by both mothers, the below and the above, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and so that's part about elder. Why don't you tell us about alder now for a while?
Yeah, well, alder is a fascinating plant. And it's one that I was mostly introduced to by Kiva Rose, and then came into my own relationship with. And so alder grows in wet places. Like it is the early succession tree of a lot of waterside forest types.
Oh, right. You're right.
And in fact, it has a wood that won't rot in water. And
Oh,
so in ancient Ireland and ancient Scotland, they would build these entire villages on platforms of alder out on the water called canogs, which means young tree. But that alder would be the pilings that would hold up the platform that the town was built on. It was also used for laying the roads for the first chariots
oh,
and for building bridges.
mm,
And then is also very well known throughout both Scandinavian and Celtic cultures for making a wonderful wood for shields, which partly I think has to do with that water resistant strength, but also I think has something to do with the fact that it's the tree that when you scratch the bark, it looks like it has bled, and so there's often a warrior association with it.
oh,
Um, in Finland, it's associated with a being who is called the Alder Man, who is a god who is both a bear but also the protector from bears. So sort of the intermediary between the human world and the bear world.
wow.
And you can, wherever alders and bears are together, see the places where the bears scratch the alder and make the tree look like it's bleeding. So that connection makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
And then the catkins and the bark were used to make dyes, including a green dye that was thought by many to be a dye with some blessing from the fairy realm. and Robin Hood's cloak was dyed with alder, and that color of green that helped him hide in the forest was part of his alliance with the plant world and with the wild.
Yeah.
And in Ireland, in Scotland, it was also the place that young couples would run off to be married by the blacksmith when they couldn't be married by the priest. So that sense of sheltering. And then just as a medicine, I work primarily with the catkins, both male and female, and the leaves, and find them wonderfully gentle but effective lymphatic. Kind of like a subtler red root almost
Oh,
in its action, but also but also having a little bit of that immune modulation way of addressing inflammation. So working with the inflammation underlying the lymphatic buildup as well.
well, yeah, you spoke so well of it when we talked, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago that I've used it once since then. And what can I say? I mean, I just could tune into it right during we tested a bunch of lymphatic remedies and they didn't turn out. And then that one, you could just feel that one starting to work and very gentle. So I now am a believer or user. Yeah, and it was Kiva Rose who introduced it as a lymphatic remedy. There's other uses to it, but that's kind of close to its heart. Yeah, major use for Western herbalists at any rate.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk? Are there other uses? I believe it. Yeah, so that's pretty nice to be both an immune modulator and a lymphatic because that's not so true. Most of the lymphatic remedies are kind of more just lymphatic. I mean, even red clover thins the blood and probably thins the lymph and fights cancer and things, but it's not an immune modulator. I don't think it's a blood thinner. And echinacea is an immune modulator, but it's not really lymphatic. It is more of an assistant. Like if you're making a lymphatic formula and you want it to move some, then you put some echinacea in because echinacea zings it. Yeah. So yeah, more about alder.
Yeah. That's a primary way that I've worked with it. I mean, I know that there are a lot of traditions of working with the bark as a more cathartic medicine,
Oh,
but it can be pretty harsh. And so I've tended to stay away from that approach myself. And
yeah. Yes, that's what I remember reading, that it's a GI remedy. And yeah, one would prefer to have a gentle effect a lot of the time. But in the old days, as you know, they loved the harsh effects because I knew something
right.
was going on. And this is true of just about every nationality, the American Indians as well as the colonial invaders and stuff. Everybody, they were all into like let's let's purge people. Let's really move those fluids.
Right. Well, and barks also store better when you don't have the kinds of ways of preserving herbs that we have now.
Yeah.
So I think there's that aspect of the history as well. I've used the catkins, especially the female catkins that look like pine cones in respiratory steams, and found that really effective in inflammatory conditions
Mm.
of the lungs. And then you can also make an oil of the leaves and catkins, which is just really wonderful topically, both soothing and healing to the skin directly, but then also seeping through to deal with inflammation that's close to the surface and with the lymphatic fluid that's close to the surface.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's makes it a little bit like calendula, which clearly acts on the lymphatic drainage from a wound.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can imagine it being very gentle and nice here. Yeah, and then what's its association with the blackbird then? I didn't know about that. So,
Yeah. So the blackbird in Irish is lone dove and is often considered to be, I mean, all birds are, but the blackbird especially is considered to be sort of a bird of the spirit. It is often associated with spiritual love as well. And in Ireland, and also when I was living a little north of here up in Rangeley, it was the same. It was exactly the same, that the blackbirds would come into the alders on the 1st of May. And so there's poetry going back thousands of years that speaks about about the song of the blackbirds filling the alders on the day of Beltane, and that being one of the ways that you know that the season has come.
huh.
The blackbirds in the alders and the blossoming of the hawthorn were the two primary signals of the season's change.
Do you differentiate, like as medicine animal go between the crow and the blackbird and the raven? How would you differentiate? I mean, it's kind of funny. I once had a whole vision. It was like it all downloaded for me for the crow and the raven, and I wrote it down, but I didn't title it somewhere on my computer. But it was kind of like some revelation. I can't even think of anything about it now, but they are very different. And the blackbird, well, the crow hectors, and the crow is
Right.
really a mischief maker and contrary and a trickster, whereas the blackbird does not seem to be that way nearly uh, well at all, almost as far as I can tell. And the
Right.
raven's not. I would say the raven eats carrion more than the blackbird, I think. Yeah. So
Yeah.
any thought?
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me the raven, a raven is more like a wolf to me, and a crow is more like a coyote in their personalities.
Very good.
Yeah.
And of course, the ravens hang out with the wolves. The ravens
Yeah.
will start flying around and then to attract the pack of wolves, and then the wolves come in and rip apart the animals so that the crows can get at the flesh. They can't really, I mean the ravens, excuse me. The ravens can't really get at much except poke out the eyes, which you'll see if you see a dead deer quickly. That happens within a half a day.
Right.
But if the wolves get at it, then boom, and then everybody can eat the wolves and the ravens. And I've seen pictures, I haven't seen it myself, of wolves and ravens feasting together. So you're quite right there. There is a connection there. And
Yeah.
of course, they are associated with wisdom too, whereas the crows are, I mean, they may have wisdom, but they don't share it.
I think they have cunning more than they have wisdom.
Yes, yes. And but here's one difference. It's kind of funny. I don't think I only read this to be true of crows are the only other animal other than humans that recognize death, like that know when one of their own has died. And
Hmm.
it's said that I mean I found this a little hard to believe, but the Jewish folklore is that when Adam and Eve, when they discovered Abel dead, they learned from the crows how to have what do you say, a wake, a funeral. And in fact, I I've known people who have seen crow funerals where there's a dead crow there, and then they all gather around, and there's like somebody kind of speaking, talking to all the rest of them. It's kind of crazy. So, and they teach their young about this. So, yeah, I don't know if that's true. Maybe the stories that they meant all the blackbirds, but it was said specifically of the crows. And another story that I really like that just seems so darn true, like from India, there's a that said that the crows can prophesize the future, but
Mhm.
if they know that you're listening, they tell you all sorts of things that are wrong.
I like that.
Oh yeah.
Thinking about the funerals, I don't doubt about some human people learning funerals from crows, but I do think that I know that at least elephants and whales also have
Oh,
funerals,
yeah,
and
elephants, I've heard about that. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. Kind of hard to learn about funerals from elephants, though, maybe.
right, yes,
But
yeah, and even harder, probably even harder to learn it from whales. So
yeah. So where would we put? So what else could we say about blackbirds, actually?
yeah, so blackbird to me is very different from either the crow or the raven.
Yeah.
To me, the blackbird really is. It's primarily a bird of song and beauty to me, and that kind of harbinger of the blossoming beauty to come. Like I feel like I hear the blackbird singing in the alders, and their music just echoes through everything.
Oh,
And then a few weeks later, the leaves are on the trees, and the leaves of the alders are the most gorgeous green that the sun filters through so perfectly. And when that's happening, then I feel like I know summer has truly arrived.
uh-huh. Uh, yeah. Well, one thing that blackbird taught me is that hmm, so well, years ago I was speaking. Maybe this means that mullein is a blackbird remedy, but so I was speaking about mullein um and well, I was at a I've probably told you may have heard this story, but I was at a class taught. I was teaching at Jim McDonald's house in uh, near Detroit, like 15, 20 years ago. And I told this story. I said, "Yeah, I went on this herb walk that Jim Jim was leading, and he told us how mullein, the leaves near the center of the plant relax the nerves, and the leaves further out give you nightmares." And I said, "Thanks, Jim, for teaching about that." And I turned to him and he said, "I never said that." And I had a whole memory of it. That's the thing about mullein, it'll plant memories in your mind. Very strange, and other people have experienced this. But so I was teaching at a conference and he was there, and this woman raised her hand and she said, "Well, I'm a witch and we use mullein, the outer leaves, which are graveyard dust. This isn't really a Mayday plant. They call it graveyard dust to give people nightmares." And I was like, "Wow, that sounds kind of mean. When would you ever want to do that?" Well, one time I was being some witches were interfering, some petty witches. I don't know what to call them. They're dilettante cursors, and I just was tired of dealing with them in my mind. I said, "You really can't do this kind of stuff." And I would hold your hand to the fire. There was a couple of them, but I don't want to waste my time. And Blackbird had come to me, and Blackbird said, "Oh, I'll help." And I said, "Oh, what would you do?" And Blackbird said, every time this woman uh, tries to abuse psychic energy, I'll give her a nightmare." And it
Mm.
was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. I get it. Oh, now I see why you would actually want to send nightmares, especially to your students, if you were doing training in that type of thing." So that's pretty respectable. And actually, Blackbird did not come back for a couple of years. And then when Blackbird came back to me, I had dreams about that woman again with her, actually about the curses against me. And she led a little coven against me. She's not the one I originally who attacked me with the Blackbird. That's how the Blackbird came to me. He preferred me to her. But so um, Blackbird came back, boom, just to say hi, maybe, I don't know, and went off again. I woke up early in the morning, about 4 in the morning, and blackbird, into the darkness of the night, the Beatles. So it was like Blackbird was there again. Hi, for a couple days, and then off again. So I guess it might be a medicine that, unless you really have a strong affinity, it might come and go some. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't have the right to keep it in some way. So, well, so there was a little blackbird story that I've had, and I suppose if I ever get attacked that way again, I'll have. Of course, we're all attacking each other all the time.
Well, yeah, and this is a time of year in Irish tradition where you had to be extra careful of that sort of thing because
Oh,
magic was stronger. And
oh,
so the tradition was
oh,
to the two traditional protections were rowan and vervain.
oh,
And it would be some rowan wood in the fire
oh,
and rowan hung in the barn. Although you also had to check for somebody else putting rowan on your cattle, but somebody else doing that might be cursing your cattle. But
oh,
then the farmer would take the vervain in his hand and walk the entire perimeter of the land, just
oh,
holding the vervain and holding that intention for protection. And
ah,
that would be what would protect all of the crops and all of the livestock and all of the family from harm
ah,
during the season to come.
yeah, yeah. Well, gee, I've been burning rowan wood for the last year and a half or two. Yeah, my parents had a huge rowan. I mean, it got at the base, it was like, I mean, that's huge for a rowan. In fact, some city arborists, in their city truck and stuff, they stopped with almost a gasp and came out and looked at it, and they said, "This is the biggest rowan in the city." And my dad had it cut down the last year of his life, actually. Um, it was because it was getting rotten on the inside. I would have tolerated it for longer. It was just such an astonishing tree. But so we had all this rowan wood, and I chopped some up, and my brother-in-law did, and cut it up, and it burns pretty nicely. It's kind of like apple wood or something. Cherry wood is not a very good. I mean, that family, it's not guaranteed to be good wood, but oh, plum is really the one that's really hard to. I don't know what it is, but some members of that family, the wood is so nice, and that's true of apple and rowan. Yeah, so I was getting protection all that while, and there's still a few pieces of it around. I'll have to make sure to keep burning one a month or so.
Yeah.
And you know, um, the thing is that we all attack each other with our thoughts.
Right. And I also and not so much this specific to this time of year, but I always think of agrimony as so protective in that way, not
Yeah.
only from other people's thoughts, but also from our own. And there is the Bosnian magician Drato Mikaharek who wrote that an agrimony bath is wonderful for removing curses, especially those very worst curses, the ones we put on ourselves with guilt and shame and fear.
Wow, I haven't heard of that. What book is that?
It was I don't remember if it was his psychic cleansing book or his 100 spells book, but Draja Mikaharek, I think Micaharic, I think, or something close to
Huh.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the English translation, it was never published, of Dioscorides is by John Goodyear, 1666, and he mentions washing your hands with cinquefoil, which is the same as agrimony, basically,
Oh yeah.
to get rid of enchantments. And
Mm-hmm.
really, to wash your hands, I mean, because that plant looks like a hand. I really think that's the plant, and agrimony works the same way, to remove curses that have to do with your work, or even just nasty bosses or nasty employees, or or even just to help you work better or bring things to your attention if you're the one who's the nuisance
Right.
maker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And here's something I was wondering about. So I was thinking about vervain, and I've been trying to make the connection between how I work with vervain, which I mostly learned from you, and that Irish tradition of protection.
Well, yeah.
And I began to wonder if those high standards and aggressive forward drives, and all of those kinds of ideas that are creating that tension might be things coming in from the culture to people. And if vervain might be partially helping to create a buffer against those ways of thinking.
That really makes sense. Yeah. Um, it's kind of the fanatics remedy. People that are fanatically, yeah, do everything like I do it. In fact, I'd say, yeah, they might attack you with your thoughts out of feeling like they're trying to better you, which is different. Or they do it to themselves. So I got to do this. Then when they come in and a client, they're like, well, I should be jogging. I should be walking more, but I don't. Or I should be, and then they say, and I should be eating better, but they don't. I don't. And then and I should do this or that. And it's like, oh, you need vervain. First, you got to accept yourself the way you are, and then you can do whatever you want. But first, you got to be gentle to yourself. Yeah. So, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense that the vervain would be for people breaking in really mentally, just rigidly against you. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, no, Hawthorn, on the other hand, I have used this so Hawthorn is another of the fairy plants. And I remember the first time I ever used it this way, or the only time, maybe, or one of the few times. Well, it's a great remedy for attention deficit and for lack of focus. I didn't know that then. David Winston taught us that, I don't know, 20 years ago, but this is probably 25 years ago. I was on my farm, Sunnyfield Herb Farm in Minnetrista, and I just felt really spaced out for 2 weeks. I was like spacing out all the time. I just couldn't focus. I was spaced out, and I thought, oh, I've been kidnapped by the fairies. And I immediately thought, oh, I need Hawthorn, a fairy. So only Hawthorn and Elder are kind of the famous fairy remedies, at least for me, the ones I know about. So I took some Hawthorn, boom, back to earth, and I have definitely found that is a remedy, as David Winston said, for attention deficit, for hyperactivity, and also for adults who can't focus, which can be just as maddening to adults. I mean, they got kids to raise, meals to make, work to do, family to run, so it can be kind of really something that's too much for them too. So that's a major thing with Hawthorn. Yeah, it's also a remedy for anxiety and for depression. I collected various people have collected case histories on that. I don't tend to think of it that way, but a lot of other people do. So
For me, I see I see it with a certain kind of anxiety that
uh,
I experience, but it's really the anxious overwhelm that comes from sensory overwhelm or emotional overwhelm, which are kind of the same thing. Whether
yeah,
it's just too much sensation or emotion welling up, and so like that heat in the heart moves up, and I'll often see it in the earlobes,
oh,
turning red, and find that it's tremendously helpful then.
wow,
Um, Sometimes I'll combine it with calamus for sensory overwhelm if there's also the element of the overwhelm makes it difficult to bring expression.
uh-huh.
And I've also found it highly useful for asthma attacks that come from strong emotional triggers and have a kind of hot inflammatory nature, which I extrapolated from things that Deborah Francis wrote.
Yeah, she really put it on the map for us. Kind of breaking out of the mold. Oh, a heart remedy, period. We don't know much else about it. And she really brought a lot of stuff out. She's a naturopath. I think she still is. I'm sure she's still with us in Portland, Oregon. And oh, I like watching the fire. I'm burning all this crap because I inherited all this from my dad. Like, he would just collect wood in the basement, and then there was some furniture that we no longer. He passed away in December, and so I have like cords and cords of wood that I cut, but I got to use up all this junk wood that I inherited. My brother-in-law cut it up for me. It's just, I can't believe it. It just goes on and on. I mean, it wouldn't take you through the winter, but it's been quite a trove of pieces. So, yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, and I was collecting stuff on Hawthorn. In fact, the Hawthorn paper is going to be in our library shortly because Phyllis Light and I did a thing on the Rose family, and that, of course, was in there. And well, we both have great backgrounds here. You have your background. I have the log cabin background.
Yeah.
Surrounded very, very, what can you say, wilderness-like. Yeah. Although, yeah, my house was built by itself in 1854, but a small town gathered around it. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Although in any direction you can go and get out in the wilderness almost immediately. Yeah. But yeah, Glenn Nagel, another Portland naturopath, he said too grounded or not grounded enough. Overly grounded or not grounded enough. And again, almost too materialistic. People that forgot they'd like to believe in the fairies. They overlook the fairies, I guess you'd say. They just wouldn't, kind of have lost that sort of magical touch to thinking, which really, you don't need to believe in magic to need magic and to, and to benefit from having a more magical kind of view of the world. So yeah, that kind of fits in. And yeah, yeah, well, out there on the farm, I mean, I've never had that happen again, but I hadn't really lived on a farm for more than 5 years then, and it was an herb farm. And you could work too hard. You could get too immersed in the physical, or you could get too daydreamy being an herbalist. So I may have, and then boom, the fairies got you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had an incredible case history that I wrote out that was, I'm gonna have smoke in the, okay, yeah, go up. Yeah, as soon as the fire takes and the smoke starts going up the chimney. Yeah, okay. Woman was allergic to a dog. They got a dog at the pound. They just loved it. And she was so allergic to it, terribly allergic, like puffing out everywhere. And I had given her Hawthorn 20 years before for allergies, I think. I think they were respiratory. And that's the direction of cure, to go from the inner to the outer to the skin. And she said, oh, maybe I should use that remedy again. Boom. It really dramatically helped her a great deal. So, but it's really quite it's kind of like mast cell activation. I mean, it's just like a rampant autoimmune, innate immune system reaction. So, yeah, it's for the immune system. It's for the heart. It's for the mind. It's for the lungs. It's turning out for asthma, for allergic things there. In Chinese medicine, it's for the stomach. And there you get anxiety too. I had a beautiful case history that way. One of my apprentices, like, he would eat and this food would sit on his stomach. That Chinese call it food stagnation. That's the name of the disease. And, which is pretty basically what it is. And he'd get so much anxiety about it. And, so, in the digestive tract is kind of the earth element in Chinese medicine. So there's that too. So I mean, we're finding out more and more organs, and I found a little bit evidence for kidneys as well. But I mean, anything that affects the immune system and the heart is going to affect the kidneys too, ultimately.
Right.
So
And Hawthorn was at the core of all of my approaches to COVID, both when I had it and when I've worked with other people during the active infection stage.
yeah,
It's always Hawthorn, yarrow, and black cohosh that I'll bring together, and a touch of lobelia to bring down the vascular inflammation and to dilate the blood vessels.
yeah, actually, quite a few. That's interesting because let's see, it would have been Omicron, which kind of hung on, and I don't think this was long COVID. I think it was actually just side effects. But four of us, three herbalists, and then a client of one herbalist, another herbalist had POTS, and we were all unvaccinated. And it was more common in the unvaccinated, although it's not exclusively, but that's positional orthostatic tension syndrome. You lie down or you sit down, or you lie down. Basically, you lie down and you wake up and your heart's pounding, or like boom. And all three of them used Hawthorn. I used wild cherry for myself just because I I do quite well with wild cherry. It cools my head, and the blood would stick in the head, and the heart would pound against it. You'd have some anxiety or some stupid dream, and then boom, 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 you get some tachycardia. There was four of us that had this, and yeah, and they used Hawthorn, pretty much red clover. Everybody used Shazandra, strangely, which I couldn't really totally justify, except that I knew I needed it, but evidently other people felt that way. But that's it just does so much. That's kind of a magic herb. Yeah. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, Hawthorn, and then there's this incredible amount of myocarditis from the vaccine, although there were I remember this. The anti-vaxxers don't emphasize it, but I do remember it, that there were cases of myocarditis from COVID before the vaccine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then after the vaccine, there's been a lot of myocarditis and pericarditis, and I have thought of the Hawthorn. I haven't had many case histories like this, but I've thought of Hawthorn. Hawthorn and dandelion is kind of what I would think of there, because dandelion ferrets out deep heat, and then Hawthorn reestablishes like the immune, bing, 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 gets that overreaction down, and is good for the heart. And so, yeah, so
yeah, the handful of COVID myocarditis people who I was seeing, I was giving Hawthorn and motherwort.
oh yeah,
And in one case, cactus, but I don't know cactus super well, so I don't use it very widely. But when I looked at the eclectic texts around myocarditis, they were talking about cactus, so and Hawthorn together, so I gave it a try.
yeah.
But one of the other interesting things with that is that a lot of it was in young athletic men, and I am actually wondering if, I see a lot of very young men overtraining
Oh,
and taking all kinds of supplements and probably a lot of steroids more and more at the gym these days.
yeah.
And I wonder how much how much the pressure that young athletic men are putting on their cardiovascular systems these days predisposes them to myocarditis when you get that kind of threat. I also talked to the pediatric cardiologist about it, who said that when they started looking for COVID myocarditis, they started also finding influenza myocarditis.
Oh, yeah. there was a tremendous uptick in 2021, so the anti-vaxxers attributed it more to the vaccine, and there was all these athletes falling dead. I think there's not as much publicity on that now, so I have to assume that that's gone down. But why was it happening? It was young men, usually sometimes young women who are athletes, and the best explanation I heard anywhere is that apparently by the time you're 65, your immune system's working at it's about 1/5 as hot as it was when you were 25. So really the spikes, both the COVID and the vaccine, had more of an effect on young people with a hotter immune system than the old folks. So that's the only. I mean, I just don't know. That's not scientists. I mean, so much of this is uninvestigated, but that was a conclusion that some people had and made some sense. So yeah, but also people that are yeah, I mean, we already know that over exercising is bad for you. I mean, that's proven. So, and that's completely independent of flus, COVID, vaccines, anything. That you exercise to a certain point, and then you regenerate, and you exercise and regenerate, exercise, regenerate. But if you go past that, you start breaking down tissue, and you don't get a positive effect. So, yeah. So folks, don't be fanatical about this, and huh. And I think there's a little bit too much tied up with I don't want to say vanity. I mean, to me it would be more like lack of self-confidence or something, that you feel like you got to build yourself up all the time.
Yeah. Well, part of what I see is that, for so many years, young women have had so many issues with body image from the media, but that with the advent of social media, I feel like there's more pressure on young men about what kind of bodies they're supposed to
Yeah.
have than there used to be, and so now it's like everybody's dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Level the playing field. Ha ha ha.
Not in that direction, please.
Oh my. Yeah. And as you get older, you can't criticize the young. They got their own, challenges to jump over. Yeah. Yeah. Or what? The horse jumping over this is what comes to my mind. Challenges. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, so this very nice, and it would make sense also that Hawthorn would act on COVID, which is really very otherworldly in many ways, like almost like I mean, it may be man-made, but it is a challenge from another world, and I had all sorts of crazy dreams. I really enjoyed those dreams. A lot of people had nightmares with the COVID. Boy, I had dreams, dragons telling me all about dragons. I know all about dragons now, and dragons go buy some land in Upper Michigan, which I did on the copper range, which is, oh, we love the copper. They said, yeah, grounds us because we are EMFs and we're sensitive to EMFs. If you're invisible, your body is made out of EMFs. So where are you going to go for protection? You're going to go where there's lots of iron or lots of copper, and then copper the best. So yeah, so the Keweenaw Peninsula over to close to Bayfield, Ashland, Wisconsin. Yeah, but yeah, that was, and really, I mean, it was so much. Those dreams were so fun for me that when I started getting better, when I realized, oh my God, I'm getting better. I'm getting bad. I no longer going to have those dreams. I'd rather have COVID and have those dreams. No, they're going. And so, I mean, you could feel that it put more DMT in your brain.
Right.
So, yeah. in fact, I felt like, oh, I understand drug addiction. Yeah, but didn't
Mm.
have any choice. I had 3 weeks. It was gone. So, boo-hoo. Yeah. Uh, so, yeah, Hawthorn. I can't think much else. So, but certainly, I mean, this is just a big deal. I mean, this isn't just, well, I don't know if it's as big deal on the continent of European continent as much as it is in the British Isles, but it's definitely not just a Celtic thing. It is so intrinsically English as well. But you can't say, you just don't know ever if the English, when they're reflecting some Celtic thing that they picked up from their Celtic, captives and slaves and people they overran, and uh, and grandparents and whatnot. The English are, I don't know, half Celtic or something like that.
Yeah, well, they were. There were the Britons who came before who came before the Romans came, and before the Angles and the Saxons were closely related to the Welsh. So it's there
Yeah.
far enough back in the mix. But one thing that's interesting between England and Ireland is very opposite views of blackthorn. Where
Oh,
in England it seems like blackthorn is almost universally viewed as negative, whereas in Ireland it can be used in negative ways by people with dark intentions,
oh,
but it's generally seen also as protective
yeah.
for those with good intentions, and protective against the other world. I mean, part of the reason why the shillelaghs, the walking sticks are also the fighting sticks, were made of blackthorn is
Oh,
because they're a protected traveler from creatures of the other world when they
oh.
were out on the road.
Boy, I mean, so I am only acquainted with, and it's blackthorn, everybody, not buckthorn, in case you, yeah. I'm only acquainted with it from southern France, and it really didn't get much above 3 feet, 4 feet maybe. And maybe it's a different variety or it's a different climate, or there was a stone right under the ground about 2.5 feet, like a limestone shelf.
Most of the blackthorn I encountered in Ireland was more like it could get out. I would see it up to about 7 feet, but not much taller than that. It was
Oh,
mostly in hedgerows along with the
oh,
hawthorn.
oh,
And then here on the land where I live in Maine, we have this anomalous little patch of blackthorn, and they're all about between 5 feet and between 4 feet and 6.5 feet. They vary.
huh. Yeah, I so it is naturalized in New England in particular. Um, and I did bring some seeds back from France. I didn't declare them at customs. And I did plant them, but I never had anything come up that I'm aware of. And no, that's getting to be 4 years. I don't think it's going to come up at all. Sometimes things take a year or two. So I was kind of disappointed, even though it's a weed and it's, I mean, if the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, DNR, heard about this, they'd probably come over and, I don't know, blowtorch my land or something to get rid of it. But I really like the tree. Although, I mean, it really, from an agricultural standpoint, it looks pretty darn pesky. But it is a member of the rose family. It is kind of beautiful in its scraggly way. And what I really liked about it was you could see all these little tunnels. The deer would go down in there and hide in there. And you could really see how it could protect them. They didn't have coyotes or wolves, but
Yeah.
they would have dogs and other things. And so they could go into the blackthorn thicket and they'd be very protected. So I imagine deer, probably rabbits, other things. It's a real protection plant for wild animals. So
Yeah. Yeah. And in Ireland, it was associated with the poetic muse. And it was said that if the poet went under the blackthorn tree at Samhain, he might meet the Lon She, the fairy lover, who had become the poetic muse, but to the extent that he was given inspiration, he would also lose life force, and so it was the.
Oops, whoa. The fairy's interfering with us. What time do we have here? 8:32. We've been at it an hour. Gee, it seems like we've covered so much stuff. Seems like 2 hours, but oh well. I hope I don't have to hold the. There we go.
There we go. Well, it's interesting timing.
Yeah, you lasted an hour, almost exactly. But hopefully, yeah, I'm not sure I can go past 9. Just we started half an hour late, but I'm
Okay.
pretty beat. But yeah, that came up. The fairies seemed to wanted to
Right. Yes.
shut us down for a moment. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I was saying that in autumn, the blackthorn is associated with otherworld beauty, and a poet could meet the Lon She, the fairy lover, beneath the blackthorn, and would be given great inspiration. But the inspiration would come at the same. The inspiration would flow in at the same rate that his life force flowed out. So it was a perilous bargain to make. But the blackthorn in springtime was associated with beauty in this world, and all the medieval Irish love poetry is comparing women to blackthorns.
Wow. Oh, well, that's an interesting view of women.
Yeah. Well, it's because of the white blossoms, and they do have the most wonderful scent. And the bees love them,
Okay.
and so it was that whole.
Yeah.
It was the flowering of the blackthorn that was connected with beauty,
Oh, and
and I guess
yeah.
the poetic inspiration in the fall would be when the blackthorn is losing its leaves and its slows in the autumn, then it's blossoming in the other world, and then when it's when and then so the life force all pours down, and then this is when the life force is flowing back into the world, into those blossoms.
Yeah, to me, I would say there's even an additional meaning there that, well, you could survive that because they can replace your vital force and your soul, even to some extent, with their energy. And it would not necessarily mean that your life was shortened, but this is what's so treacherous about the fairies is that, and a fairy lover, like you get genes from them. I mean, it's not quite the same thing as genes in our sense. Our genes are descended from what they have, which is more like tumblers that click into place, click, and that's a world. And something comes into existence that wasn't in existence before, and so that becomes genetics in our world, and they can replace some of your genetics. Once you've interacted with a fairy like that, or the fairies, uh, it forever after it will take it takes effort to be a human. You have to work at it, whereas before it comes naturally. And furthermore, if you were to have descendants, they would be marked with this energy too. So
Right.
all of them, but it's inheritable as well. And that doesn't mean that they want in on it either.
Well, but on the other hand, I'm not sure I'd be here having this conversation with you tonight if some of my ancestors hadn't.
Yeah, well, I'm revealing a little about myself. Yeah, from age 13 on, I had to try to be human because it's like, holy cow! Like when your energy comes in at puberty,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm part alien. And finally, it was the fairies that said, "Oh, that's because you have genetics from us." And it gives you like doesn't make you tied down to human affairs as much, like
Right.
easier to rise above them, but then you want to, it's like, why am I here? I still have all the human traits too, so you have to work at that. And it's an unusual and interesting state of affairs. And but and my own impression is that the Celts en masse, almost from one end of Celtia to the other, at least the Celts of the British Isles, were more into fairy marriages, into that fairy bond, than almost any nationality that I've ever come across. Because even the American Indians, that was like their word for them is in Mexico it would be in Nahuatl, it would be those who are not our brothers, and stay away from them. And um, and that's true in Minnesota too, Ojibwe and stuff. Like, yeah, kids out in the forest, they play with them and stuff, but you're not supposed to really. And they can be playful, but yeah, you're not supposed to interact with them too much. Well, the Celts, on the other hand, this just goes on and on. And Ireland, Wales, Scotland, England to some extent. Brittany is supposed to be even more magical, like really intensely. And that, of course, was, recolonized by Brits from going back with the Roman frontier. And I don't know about other parts of the Celtic world, but it's an interesting thing. And I can't think of other nationalities where that's so true. So,
Well, and in fact, under the old laws in Ireland and Scotland before the coming of the church, in order to be a free person, you had to either be able to recite your lineage going back to a fairy queen,
oh,
or enter into druidic training and thus become more of that world in that way.
okay. So then there were various serfs and stuff who were not free, right?
Right. Yeah. Up until the time of Patrick, and then he said, if you let one of your sons be a priest, then you can come be part of my tribe and be free.
Oh, okay. Well, that's part of the message of Jesus, yeah. And yeah, that is more human. And yeah, so it's great to try and be a magnanimous human and things like that. We want that, but you got to try harder almost. Yeah. It's not like before, like regular human affairs, you have to try to be good and evil, and yes, that's still true. That's even more true with the fairy blood, but you got to actually just try to be human, period. So, yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, I do think that if focused in the right way, it does allow for being a bridge between the human world and the plant world and the animal world in a different way than might otherwise be possible.
I have to assume that's why I ended up in herbalism, is due to that. Yeah. Although I started out as an artist, which is certainly and I became a writer, which is another. I mean, the writing, prose and poetry are so intimately associated with the fairies, the fairy queen in particular. And like Thomas the Rhymer, who really interacted. I mean, he met her on Contley Bank and had sex all day long with her. It's just like, God, Thomas, are you nuts? And then she said, True, Thomas, you have to come with me for 7 years. And apparently he disappeared for 7 years. And I mean, he was a historical figure.
Yeah.
And when he came back, she gave him he couldn't speak for 7 years because, boy, that's almost anything you say, they will misinterpret it and you'll end up stuck there,
Right.
But I mean, they want to keep you there because we're such luscious pieces of emotion, So they don't have that so much. But yeah, she gave him the choice between prose and poetry, but he became a prophet in addition, and I visited that town, Earlston. I visited the Hawthorn, but the original Hawthorn fell down, but they 100, 200 years ago. So they put up another one. So there's a younger one growing there. But and you could feel this love there, like the love of the fairy queen, maybe, or Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and there's a great book published in Earlston there. I don't know the author. I have it upstairs, but on Thomas the Reverend. It was just, I mean, you almost have to be there to appreciate his prophecies because a lot of them were very local. Like I passed a house that said Hague House. Okay, then I bought the book, and when I'm back in Minnesota, it says, "And the Hagues shall never leave their home until the end of the world." And they're still there apparently, and according to the book. And then a great one was on so and so on Crane Farm. So the cranes came there to the pond to mate and live and everything for hundreds of years. And when the cranes leave Crane Farm, 3 men will die. And so 2 of them had died, and the year was almost over. And one of the farmhands said, "Well, I guess Thomas was wrong," and he fell dead.
Wow.
This is 1876. It was reported in the local newspaper. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he lived in a time when you could still be. Well, Christianity didn't completely dominate. Like there was also the great, what was his name? The Reverend Kirk.
Yeah.
He was one of the translators of the Bible into Gaelic, and he was also really connected to the fairies. And in fact, he disappeared into that world. I mean, he just disappeared, period. And a year later he appeared, or was it a little bit? He appeared to one of his cousins and said, "Yeah, you could help me get out of the underworld here. I'm stuck. Like if you did thus and such." But the guy was so terrified that he didn't say anything. It might have been better not to say anything. So poor Kirk, Dr. Kirk.
Yeah.
Reverend Kirk. Yeah. Well, hopefully he had a fun time there.
Right.
He's still doing good, but the fairy world, yeah, you can get stuck there. That's the main problem with it. Yeah, and it's not so fun for a human. It's good for the fairies, but yeah. Well, let's see. So we've talked about hawthorn, elder a little bit. Should we maybe talk about elder for a while?
Sure.
Yeah, we did talk about its fairy uses and its supernaturalness some, but so it's a great flu remedy. I mean, this is one that was used in COVID quite a bit. My neighbor called me. I was out in Oregon when COVID hit, and he said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, get some kosher wine that's elderberry wine." And he drank that for 2 years and never, a little bit all week long, and never got COVID until he stopped. And then boom, he got COVID.
Wow.
And then I said, "Oh, just start drinking it again, like just a shot glass, a little bit." And so, yeah, I would get the Saint Germain elderflower or some elderberry wine that it says natural, not artificial ingredients. But so that too came in handy with COVID. It's just an anti-flu remedy, and it regulates the cytokine storm. And so the cytokines both cause inflammation and control inflammation. I mean, just about everything in the body. If there's one hormone that promotes inflammation, there's another that controls that hormone, another hormone. So it's that way with the cytokines in the immune system, in the arachidonic cascade. So that's known. For a while, it was thought in the early 2000s. I don't think this is creditable anymore, but it's very interesting in terms of the COVID and the vaccines. Is that one theory was that it broke off the spikes that the viruses use to get into the cells, but the viruses really are not. They're not really out of the cells. Oops, there we go. The viruses really can't exist separately from the cells. They're maybe on the surface of the cell, but they don't travel independently. This is becoming more and more clear. All these people who say, "Oh, there's no such thing as a virus," it's like, yeah, get a life, like be current. There is no such thing as a virus independent of a host cell, really, almost. Travel from one host cell to another. We're born with viruses, we die with viruses, that we wait until we get stressed and they flare up, but they're always in there in our cells, kind of just waiting for an opportunity, and they are agents of evolution. They've got extra genetics that our DNA doesn't have, kind of saying, "Oh, you got stressed out? Let's get you sick and we can teach you some lessons here and give you some new genetic information through viral expansion." So, if you get a virus from somebody else, it's because it was floating in a little bit of, spittle and a little bit of vapor from their breath with some host cells. It's just impossible for the viruses to exist by themselves to any great extent. So, yeah, they can be very contagious, but they still are in that vapor more. That's why they don't exist on the surface of a kitchen or something like that, and or I don't know, pot or pan. Yeah, yeah. Well, so flu, yes, first use, and this goes way back. We know. Whoops, geez, see, you're agreeing. Your body's saying, yeah, yeah. your lungs. Yeah, so the flower, I like the flower more. It's a little more effervescent, and it reminds me of sweating, and I feel like you build
Yeah.
sweat more with it. The berry, maybe not quite so much sweating, but you still get the powerful effects of its antiviral properties. So, I mean, it has proven antiviral properties. I don't think that it breaks off the spike, which is what was originally thought to be the case, but it stimulates the immune reaction at least. And, so if my friend who was taking all this time, he must have gotten exposed to COVID, but if he reacted a little bit, the elder was like, "Oh, no, don't get carried away with that. We don't need that much of a cytokine storm, not much of a cytokine reaction." So it opens the skin. Well, we herbalists, we were here a long time before them and their science stuff, huh? And we knew that it opens the skin, it opens all the channels of elimination, and in fact, so the elder does have a real strong Central European reputation. So in 810, it's a box elder bug. 810, 12, Charlemagne, he united Central Europe, northern Spain, northern Italy, France, southern or western Germany, and his son-in-law was Alfred the Great of England, so that was part of England, and Wales and all the different parts. We will emulate him. So the new Roman emperors, the new Roman king or emperor, yeah, and appointed by the Pope. So he said new public health recommendations. Every house in France, which included all these other countries, must have an elder in the yard because elder could, from a humoral medicine standpoint, a big dose of the tea can cause you to, taken quickly, can cause you to vomit, which is one way of heading off a head cold, actually, like that Samuel Thompson used, and they use an Ayurvedic medicine, or we would call it, still used in medicine. It's a nauseant expectorant, yeah, and it stimulates and can head off the head cold or treat it once it's gotten good and infected. So then a little slower, the bark will be um, purgative or even diuretic, and then acting on the skin, opening the skin if too closed. And so we looked upon disease always as like the skin is closed. We want to open it, not force it open, but enough of this viruses and all this scientific gobbledygook. you just get that skin nice and vaporous, opening, and you're going to get better. So your fever, your skin is tight. Finally, you have that night when you wake up in a sweat, and you know you're going to get better. So that's what we really attribute to elder. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love elderflower as a bath medicine
Oh.
because I feel like, and sometimes I'll both, sometimes I'll both drink an elderflower tea or take an elderflower tincture and put elderflowers in the bath, because I find that then opening up the skin allows whatever other herbs you put in the bath
Oh.
to be able to enter the system
Yeah.
better. So I
Yeah.
love it in that regard. I feel like a really good preparation for the sauna in that way as well.
Oh. Yeah.
And then I love I love elderflower in the summer for helping to vent the heat from the body, especially in combination with lemon balm.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. And this is very European, to every corner of Europe, pretty much. Well, people. So in the summertime, they'll pick it. Country people more, and I've been at houses where they picked it. Oh, did you pick this yourself? Oh, yeah, we picked it. And then other people, then you can buy it kind of like a pop, or you go to a pub or bar, and it's Hollanderwasser, and you can order that carbonated instead of alcohol, or like Saint Germain. That's an American company, really looks European, but you can get liqueur with the elderflower. I'm sure you can get elderberry wine too. Um, and and one of my friends was kind of outraged that I would even compare the Canadian elder to their elder. No, we make the better. Ours makes the better wine. Okay, all right. It's hard to taste the difference, I think. Um, and while we do not have any sponsors and we do not recommend products generally, last time I was at IKEA, which is probably 5 years ago, man, you can get like a concentration of elder flower there in sugar, which I know because I have a bottle that's 5 years old and hasn't gone bad. So it preserves it, but it's got a lot of sugar in it. But so for like $5. So like, yeah, I mean, so there's all sorts of different ways you can get it, and that's a lot cheaper than some of these mixes. Well, that was another thing. I realized that, all these alcoholic drinks, and well, when COVID broke out, before it became lockdown, I went to the liquor store and kind of made an appraisal of what herbs were available in liquor.
Mhm.
Like echinacea and wild cherry, actually in Oregon there. Hawthorn, they had hawthorn, wild cherry, lingonberry, just a whole bunch of the berries. That was again, not recommended companies, but wild root, but they just stopped doing their cherry one. And uh, so I was prepared just because, yeah, they kept the liquor stores open and didn't know how bad of a epidemic it would be. So yeah.
I feel like elderflower has some gentle nervine activity as well. It's like I wouldn't think of it as a primary nervine, but I do feel like when there's a lot of mental and emotional irritation connected with a fever or another inflammatory kind
Yeah.
of condition, that elder can really bring that down. Elderflower can really bring that down quite nicely. And I especially love elderflower and lindenflower as children's remedies for that reason.
Oh yeah, linden, very nervine, heat reducing, mucilaginous, so it's moistening. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, these are real basic. They're still available in Europe, even though EU tried to, the 22 herbs that Europeans can buy, that are in the market. Otherwise, you're going to be a pharmacist or something, unless you're in England. Um, and so, or you just decide to break the law anyways, or run on the edge of it. Yeah, there's plenty of herbalists all through Europe. and despite the EU, and some of them are my friends. And in Germany, that they have very good legal representation there as naturopaths. Yeah. So I've used it as a constitutional. So reddish, very reddish, dry cheeks, and blue over the bridge of the nose, or elsewhere. Also, wrist swollen and blue. And babies born with swollen blue over the nose, and they're not. The herbalist had taught me about it, thought it prevented crib death, and I definitely think that there's something to that. That you open the skin, and the lungs and the kidneys and everything work better. So, and the mother would take it, not the child necessarily. And it is a croup remedy, and definitely it's kind of, what do you say? It's a little bit of a non-specific cough remedy, except the cough is often worse at night. Actually,
Yeah.
that was a trait of COVID as well. COVID would attack at night. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it in honey for that, especially.
Oh, okay. Oh, the throat. Yeah. Yeah. And so I might point out here, if you go around, you go to the post office, you go to the grocery store, you might have this yourself. There are so many people with dry coughs now, and it's not long COVID. It's more like the damage. It's the tissues got dried out, they got undernourished, they got lack of vitality, and they get over the COVID, but the cough lingers. This happened to me. I finally it took me a year to figure out. Oh, no, I mean the remedy that helped me, I'll tell you, Sean, you'd love it, is hart's tongue, that fern, hart's
Mm-hmm.
tongue fern, and because my cough was right under the sternum,
Yeah.
and it looks like a sternum. Looks like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it looks like a hart's tongue, like boom. And boy, has it acted quickly, and that was after a year. But, try what works, and it sounds here like, elder might be quite a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, Solomon's seal was the one that helped me the most with
Oh,
that, actually.
oh, that sure makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Say, do you I mean, solid seal, it's not that native in Maine, is it? Or do you have
There's
some?
some. We have more of the dragon root of the false Solomon
Oh,
seal than of the true, but we do have the true as well.
well, plant it, all you Mainers, all you northern, yeah, so it grows up the Connecticut Valley. I imagine it's growing in the Hudson. It grows, as Tismal, Indian friend of mine said, grows in the great river valleys of the Midwest. That is true, but the Connecticut is one place it grows, and it likes better soil maybe, but wherever you are, try to plant that, and because we don't want to tax the wild populations, and I haven't seen that the wild populations have been taxed that much, but it has such a good herb. I mean, it's like if I could only have one herb, well, I would want that one in yarrow, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just so beneficial, so many things. Okay, yarrow, elder, and Sullivan seal. That'd be a good triad. So Hawthorn wouldn't be a bad part triad too. Yeah. Well, geez, anything else on your mind you can think of? I'm glad you mentioned Solomon seal for, uh, yeah, moistening the throat there. Yeah, and lungs from that old cough that remains.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, if we left out any plants, well, I'm kind of thinking you and I can talk again at Halloween, which is,
That'd
what's,
be great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Then we really got things to talk about with the fairies. That's it.
Yeah. And hopefully technology will be more cooperative then.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and of course, summer solstice is also a big fairy time. So
Oh yeah, yeah. Or just a good time. Well, maybe we might get together then, or we can just have you, or you can pick someone to talk to. Yeah. Right now I'm so tired. It's like I don't want to agree to another.
yeah.
Well, you both have books coming out here soon too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
and we both will be featured, and we will probably singly, and we should actually both do an interview together, because yours on Irish folklore and mine on, yeah, there's Sean's school. And I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of similarities. Mine's called a shamanic herbal, and so it's otherworldly too. So I'll have to, can't wait to see and read Sean's, and we'll find out how similar or different we are. But I think we ought to do a joint class on this. So yeah.
Is this your latest one that's coming out, Seán?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing right now.
Oh,
Everything's breaking up a bit.
okay. Well, you can see that we're advertising your book there, and maybe that's taking away from you, the real person.
Well, nonetheless, those of you who can hear us, you can find out the latest of what Seán has to offer on his website, otherworldwell.com. And he does have online classes as well as upcoming book. I know at least, Seán, if you can hear me now, I'm wondering, is the Silver Branch the one that's coming out next?
Yeah, this is the one coming out. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys are both so prolific. Sometimes it's hard to there's so much going on. So this can be pre-ordered, as well as Matthew's. And Matthew, yours is a shamanic
Herbal. Yeah.
herbal. And so if you just type that into Google, you'll find your favorite bookseller who's selling it. You can get it through Simon & Schuster's, a nice way to get it. But they're on pre-order right now.
Mine's coming out in mid-July, and Sean's is coming out sometime similar, June or July. Yeah. So that's why it'd be nice to do a program on that, on our two books. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should do that. We'll set that up.
Yeah.
And of course, at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, you can learn all sorts of things herbal. We our year one enrollment, this current cohort is closing tomorrow. So you still have just a few hours to join. And this is an optional accelerated option that will prepare you to be ready for year two curriculum in early 2025. So if you just want to zip right through and get onto your year two, this is perfect for you. And but if you want to take some more time, that is an option as well. We have an amazing Herbs for the Musculoskeletal System class coming up. We're always offering free classes. And those of you who are here with us on YouTube and Facebook, for example, make sure to turn on those notifications. So whenever we go live like this, you'll be notified and you can attend live. And Mashal is saying, would be great to have you two present your books together.
Yeah.
I agree. So you can still watch Bitter Herbs, for example, is a class that Matthew and Phyllis presented a couple weeks ago. And absolutely, if you have not downloaded these free Materia Medica cards, these are the latest and greatest in information from Matthew Wood, most updated of his materials from all of his books. And they're absolutely free on the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. And they are beautifully done, detailed. Just from beginner to advanced, they're the tool that you want to have, the resource you want to have at your side. And always wonderful things going on. Make sure to, if you're not already, enroll, subscribe in our newsletter. You will get the latest, the greatest, the best offers. We have a grand reopening coming up in June. And so you'll definitely want to be on the mailing list and learn about all the amazing things that are being offered in the month of June. And Matt is traveling quite a bit as well. So check out our calendar if you're wondering where you can see Matt near you. At the top of the screen, you'll notice in the menu, there's a calendar. And any event that has a little airplane next to it, then Matt is traveling. And you can click on that and see where he'll be. And Matt will be, for example, in Maine here soon.
Yeah, and Sean will be too. So you can see us both at the, what's that called, Sean?
Maine Fungi Fest.
Yeah.
Fungi Fest. That is in our calendar. It's multiple days, but the day that Matthew will be there is May 18th. And so if you can just Google mainfungifest.com, and there's also a link here in our calendar.
I'm gonna get going. I'm so tired.
No problem. We're pretty much done anyways, I think. Seán, was there anything that you would like to add about what you have going on?
He's faded away.
Oh yeah, and then he's I think it's truly time then. Unless Seán, you are still here. If you want to add anything.
Well, just my gratitude for time with Matthew tonight, and my gratitude to you, Tara, for helping to make this all possible. And actually, I will be teaching this coming Sunday about tree blossom medicines. So if you got curious about some of the tree flowers we were talking about, there'll be a deep dive into them on Sunday night at the Other World Well Hedge School.
I highly recommend Seán's classes. I get notified of all the events that are going on. And I'll tell you, it's like candy that you don't know exists. I hear a title, I'm like, that sounds amazing. That sounds great. That sounds like fun. And I'm already doing so many classes. Otherwise, I would love to watch and listen to all those, but I'm sure they're just herbal candy if there's an equivalent. I'd highly recommend Seán's classes as well. They're really delightful. And we just did an interview here on the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism with Jesse Wolfharden and of the Good Medicine Confluence and the Plant Healers magazine. And Seán will be teaching there as well. Looks like his audio and video froze up again, but I'll just do that plug for him as well. Check out that interview. I mean, that event sounds absolutely amazing. And your favorite herbalist will be there as well. So glad you enjoyed it, Linda. And Martial Artist 2012 is going to be at Maine Fungi Fest. And thank you all for chiming in. And take care. Have a wonderful night. Make sure to like, subscribe, share. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.